As I entered my stepson's room intending to offer some assistance, the situation swiftly transformed into an unexpectedly thrilling experience. It all began on a relaxed Sunday afternoon, the sort of day that feels incredibly serene yet also somewhat welcoming. I had dedicated a significant amount of time to organizing and completing small tasks to help clear my mind. The house seemed quite vacant now that my husband had left for an impromptu fishing trip with friends, casting an unusual stillness over the weekend. My stepson Kyle sat in his room, the distant thump of bass resonating softly through the air. The sound of his music floated down to my spot in the kitchen. The space was rarely ours alone, yet the atmosphere between Kyle and me remained effortlessly relaxed. At 22, he exuded a typical confident energy, yet occasionally a hint of shyness would emerge. As time passed, I grew to deeply appreciate the serene bond we shared. It lacked extravagance or ostentation, simply being consistent and genuine calming. Once I completed the dishes, I took a glass of iced tea and leaned against the kitchen window. The warmth of the sun enveloped me, penetrating to my core. The stillness was meant to soothe, yet I found myself grappling with a restless energy, making it difficult to remain at ease. After a while, I chose to see how Kyle was doing. Upon reaching the summit of the stairs, the gentle strains of music from his room still lingered in the air. The door stood slightly open, allowing the sound to escape into the air. I heard a sound as if someone was attempting to slip away. Unnoticed, I hesitated, briefly contemplating whether to knock or simply walk away. Yet an inexplicable urge, perhaps curiosity, compelled me to approach nearer. I shouted his name. As I glanced through the slender opening, I became motionless. Kyle sat on the edge of his bed, appearing at ease, yet deeply concentrated. His hands moved with purpose, yet I couldn't discern his actions, and his gaze remained fixed downward. His brow was gently creased in focus. I nearly gasped when I understood what was unfolding. It felt incredibly personal, and I realized I ought to have turned my gaze elsewhere to grant him the space he appeared to desire. Yet I remained there, paralyzed. Surprise and curiosity washed over me as I truly sensed the vulnerability of the moment. Kyle was utterly immersed in his own realm, blissfully oblivious to everything beyond his room, and I found myself completely captivated. The gentle afternoon light poured in, creating delicate shadows that highlighted his features beautifully, and the gentle arc of his shoulders. I realized I likely shouldn't merely be standing there observing him, yet there was an undeniable quality to his authenticity and transparency that captivated me. A lingering curiosity, a silent question that eluded my ability to articulate before I had the chance to process it. Kyle glanced up, and our gazes met through the slim opening of the door. Time seemed to stand still. His expression shifted from astonishment to a blend of bashfulness and uncertainty. His hands ceased their motion, and for a brief moment we found ourselves in S&S, snared in an uncomfortable stillness that seemed destined to stretch on indefinitely. I attempted to utter a word, any word, to alleviate the tension, yet silence prevailed. My heart was racing uncontrollably. Then Kyle made the first move, extending his arm to seize a nearby blanket and enveloping himself in it, his cheeks flushing a vivid crimson. "I didn't think I'd see you here," he murmured, his voice soft and laced with a hint of shame. "I apologize," I exclaimed, my cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Heat rushed to my cheeks as I retreated from the entrance. "I didn't mean to," I said hurriedly. But Kyle shook his head and lifted a hand as if he wanted me to pause. "It's all right," he said quickly, though his voice trembled. "Just give me a minute." I nodded and retreated down the hall to the top of the stairs, my mind swirling with uncertainty. The situation was utterly chaotic. I ought to have walked away, ought to have retraced my steps. However, witnessing Kyle in such a vulnerable and raw state lingered in my mind. I remained there, gripping the banister tightly as I struggled to regain my breath. A torrent of thoughts surged through my mind, each one more perplexing than the previous. I had never encountered Kyle in this manner before, not merely in terms of his appearance, but also in the essence of his emotions. His expression held a depth that struck me profoundly, an emotion I struggled to articulate and couldn't seem to dispel. At the time, I had no idea, but that moment set in motion a series of events that would prove to be quite remarkable. The door of Kyle let out a creak. The door creaked open, jolting me from my reverie. He entered the hallway. Appearing somewhat hesitant and steering clear of eye contact, he donned his typical t-shirt and shorts, yet the flesh on his cheeks and his fidgety posture revealed his anxiety. "I apologize for that," he murmured, gently resting against the doorframe. "I didn't intend for you to catch that." "It's all good," I replied hastily, sensing my own anxiety rising. His voice was softer than normal. "I ought to have knocked, it simply escaped my thoughts." He nodded, and for a fleeting moment, our gazes locked before he turned his eyes elsewhere. "I suppose we're square now," he remarked, letting out a nervous laugh. "Oh, is that so?" I inquired, tilting my head in bewilderment. He shrugged, a faint smile gracing his lips. "You discovered me, I have discovered you. Do you recall last summer when you neglected to secure the bathroom door?" That memory struck me unexpectedly, causing my cheeks to flush once more. I completely overlooked that uncomfortable moment. We simply dismissed it at that time. "You might be right," I replied with a soft chuckle. Even though a hint of discomfort lingered within me, the tension between us dissipated as that shared memory shattered the awkwardness, restoring the familiar comfort we usually enjoyed. Yet, amidst our laughter, an odd sensation lingered within me. It felt as if an unvoiced shift had occurred between us, something subtly lingering. Just below the surface, I remained in place, wishing for someone to see me. Yet, as the laughter faded, an unusual stillness enveloped the room. The silence was unlike any other. Kyle leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, exuding a relaxed vibe. Yet an odd tension lingered in the air around him. I was at a loss for words, and for a brief moment I considered retreating downstairs to allow him some breathing room, feeling as though I had intruded. Yet I noticed him stealing glances my way, hesitant, as if he were searching for something, and that compelled me to remain where I was. It wasn't exactly uncomfortable, more akin to something gentle, nearly affectionate. He appeared so exposed that it drew me in, compelling me to stay close. At last I found the courage to speak, though. My voice came out more gentle than I intended. "Would you like to discuss it?" Kyle's eyes widened slightly, and a subtle flush crept across his cheeks as he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "What precisely are we discussing?" he asked, his tone light yet unmistakably anxious. I offered him a soft smile, wishing to ease the atmosphere. "You do not. If you prefer not to, that's completely fine, but I thought it could be beneficial." He halted, gazing at the ground as he massaged the nape of his neck. "I'm not sure," he replied after a moment, a hint of embarrassment in his voice. I approached cautiously, taking deliberate steps as if I were trying not to frighten a timid creature. "Hey, feeling awkward is completely natural. Everyone has experienced that," he offered, a modest, self-arsing smile. "Not everyone is discovered by their stepmother." His tone blended humor with a touch of awkwardness, causing me to chuckle softly. To my astonishment, his smile expanded just a bit more. "I suppose not," I replied, resting against the wall across from him to reflect his stance. "Honestly, I've found myself in plenty of awkward situations as well. You're not alone in this." Kyle glanced up at me, a hint of relief crossing his face. "Yeah, but you always appear so composed, as if you have everything sorted out." The remark took me by surprise, leaving me with an odd sensation that I couldn't fully identify. "I'm not as composed as you believe," I remarked, my tone softening. "Believe me, there have been numerous occasions when I felt completely adrift." He scrutinized me intently. "Hold on a moment," he said, lifting his eyebrows as if he were attempting to decipher my meaning. "It's simply strange," he eventually confessed, his tone reflecting a hint of contemplation. You're quite unlike Dad. Not in a negative sense, just in a different way. I'm not sure how to, I remarked. Indeed. Being different can have its advantages at times. Kyle nodded, yet his expression remained contemplative. After a moment, he replied, "Yeah, I suppose that's true." Another silence enveloped us, yet this one carried a different laundry, sorting through the mail, anything to distract from that moment in the hallway. Yet regardless of my efforts, I remained haunted by the expression on Kyle's face and the tremor in his voice. It lingered with me like a shadow, constant presence. I continued to reassure myself that it was merely a fleeting, uncomfortable instance we would both move past. Yet the harder I attempted to dismiss it and soothe my mind, the more restless I became, particularly due to the way he gazed at me, so sincere and transparent that it awakened something profound within me. By evening, I felt completely drained emotionally. I sank into the couch, a book in hand, yearning to immerse myself in its pages. I sought refuge in an imagined realm to find solace from the turmoil within my mind. Yet the text before me began to fade, and my gaze wandered repeatedly to the shut door at the top of the staircase. In an instant, the sound of footsteps reached my ears, prompting me to glance upward. Kyle descended the stairs, his hair tousled as if he had just rolled out of bed, appearing somewhat uncertain, which tugged at my heartstrings a bit. "Hey," he murmured softly, pausing at the foot of the stairs. "I was planning to brew some tea. Would you like me to fetch you a cup?" The unexpected question caught me off guard, and before I had the chance to reconsider, I simply nodded. "That sounds wonderful, thank you." Carl made his way into the kitchen, and after a brief pause I found myself compelled to follow him, captivated by his energy. Upon entering, he began to fill the kettle, his movements exuding a tranquil and measured energy. The soothing sound of water bubbling permeated the space, harmonizing with the delicate clinking of cups as he placed them on the counter. "Would you like a bit of honey in your tea?" he inquired. He glanced over at me and said, "Yeah, please." I rested against the counter, observing him. He appeared relaxed, yet there was an underlying tension in his movements, as if he were attempting to divert his own attention. We fell into silence for a brief moment. The kettle let out a gentle whistle, the only sound in the stillness. I felt the need to fill the uncomfortable silence, yet the perfect words eluded me. As the tea reached its perfect brew, Kyle strolled by me. He took a mug and leaned against the counter opposite me. He lifted the cup to his lips, taking a delicate sip as he gazed at the steam swirling upward. "I've been reflecting on your words." He finally shattered the stillness, his tone firm yet earnest. I tilted my head, anticipating his reasoning for why we shouldn't get together. "I suppose I've dedicated so much energy to fulfilling others' expectations that I lost sight of my own desires." His words resonated deeply, and I carefully placed my mug down. My trembling hands betrayed the turmoil within me, revealing my true emotions. "Kyle," I said gently, "it's perfectly fine to feel that way. You're still navigating through everything, and that's completely normal. You don't need to have all the answers at wait." I observed the tension in Kyle's shoulders dissipate, and the anxious lines around his eyes soften as he reclined against the doorframe. After a brief moment of reflection, he spoke with genuine remorse. "I apologize that you had to witness that, I suppose." So I responded, "I wasn't fully focused. I totally overlooked your presence here." "It's all good," I replied, swiftly aiming to reassure him. "To be honest, it's really not a major issue. I simply want to ensure that you're all right." Kyle nodded, his gaze averted from mine. "Yes, I'm okay. It's simply I'm not sure it's challenging." I inclined my head, intrigued by his attempt to convey something. He nervously toyed with the hem of his shirt, evidently grappling with how to express himself. "At times, being in the company of others can be challenging. Wouldn't you agree? There are times when I sense the need to behave in a particular manner, and when I stray from that, it feels as though I'm failing." His words struck me more profoundly than I anticipated, and a wave of compassion washed over me for him. "Kyle," I murmured, gently leaning in slightly. "You simply need to be yourself. You don't have to meet anyone's expectations, not mine, not your dad's, not anyone's." He gazed up at me, his eyes wide and probing, and for a fleeting moment I caught a glimpse of a fleeting view of the fragility he typically concealed. "Do you honestly believe I'm aware of that?" I replied, resolute. "You're a good guy, Kyle. You don't need to prove anything to anyone." A faint smile played at the corners of his mouth, and I noticed the tension in his body begin to dissipate. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice scarcely audible. "You're welcome," I murmured gently. We lingered in that moment, the silence enveloped us, extending into an expansive void. Resonating with Kyle's lips formed a fleeting smile, and I experienced a sense of relief witnessing him in brighter spirits. Yet despite the tension subsiding, I remained unable to dispel the sense that a shift had occurred in our relationship. He gazed at me for a moment longer than normal, sending my heart racing in a bewildering manner. Finally, Kyle straightened up, eased away from the doorframe with a soft sigh, and remarked, "I suppose I should do something worthwhile." His tone airy yet somewhat strained. His expression bore a trace of doubt. "Take your time," I said gently, a warm smile gracing my lips. "Take your time to make a decision." He nodded, our gazes locked for a moment. Then he turned and gently shut his door behind him. I lingered for a moment, gazing at the shut door, experiencing an unusual blend of feelings. I found myself grappling with my emotions, perhaps a blend of bewilderment and intrigue. But one thing stood out distinctly: everything between Kyle and me was on the brink of a significant transformation. I realized that nothing would ever return to its former state. Yet what lay ahead was shrouded in even greater uncertainty. The remainder of the afternoon passed in a haze. I occupied myself with small tasks: folding